Princeton University's Keller Center, educating leaders for a technology-driven society.
Today we have Gupta, who is the co-founder and CEO of Carmera. He actually graduated from Princeton in 2000, he majored in civil engineering and operations research, network optimization, and transport systems. He also currently was an advisor for the Autonomous Tractor Corp. He was vice president of Discus, which was the web's largest community discussion network. And he currently has experience in product development, strategic planning, and consulting. I want to invite him to the stage now.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Hey everyone. While I wait for this to catch, first of all, does this work? I mean, can you just hear me even without the mic like this? Okay. So yeah, I wanted to try something a little different, time permitting, than maybe some of the other dinner talks, and keep it pretty casual and very interactive. Basically, I was trying to think about if I were in your shoes, you know, a long time ago, when 20 years ago when I was in your shoes, what I would have been interested in learning more about if I were an aspiring, entrepreneur, or just wanted to, sort of actually do startups full time after school. And one of the things that came to mind was actually I remember even as far back as middle school, I had, always had these ideas about products or companies that I might want to try to start, and a lot of those ideas were dumb at the, I would find out later, but some of them had some promise. But even when I thought they were good ideas, I didn't necessarily know. It's kind of overwhelming to know where to start and how to get something to kind of get traction, from a sort of a from a blank slate. So that's what I wanted to focus on today, and some of what I'll talk about. I mean, if any of you guys have read up on lean startup literature and stuff like that, I'm sure a lot of the principles we'll talk about is from some of that. But hopefully, you'll sort of hear about something new. But more importantly, I wanted to flag this up front right now. Is what I'd like to do after I do a hopefully relatively short spiel at the beginning. I'm going to try to fly through it. Is ask people to raise their hands and see if they have an idea that they'd like to sort of workshop with the group, applying what I'm going to be talking about, what I'm calling find an edge, ride the wedge. You'll see what that means. Well, real quick show of hands. Who here has either an idea they've been working on or an idea that they're kind of intrigued by to work on sometime in the, let's say, the next couple years? Could be a startup. It could just be like a little hack project. Okay. All right, good. Well then, if I don't get hands at the end, I'm going to cold call, so you guys are screwed. So let me get into it then. So I'm not going to go through my background too much. I think that did a good job in the bio there. But later on, I'll talk about Carmera a little bit. But first, I wanted to kind of introduce the concept and just start out with kind of the problem that I'm talking about. And really, that's often referred to as kind of a cold start problem, right? So, and there's actually a lot of that term is used for a lot of things, but one kind of manifestation of that is when you have an idea for something that you think needs to be solved in the world, but just going from 0 to 1 is it's not unclear how to do that necessarily, and so this concept of something called the thin edge of the wedge is, I remember first seeing it about 6-7 years ago. There's a lot of tech bloggers, VC bloggers. There's blog about these kinds of things, and especially in the last 5 to 10 years, people have been a lot more transparent about how companies get started and funded and all that. And I read one actually by a guy named Chris Dixon, who's now a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, a big Sand Hill Road venture capitalist, but he's actually also he used to be very active in New York and very friendly to startup people like myself. And so actually at the end of this, I'll put a little link up in case you want to read his full post and read more about it. But a lot of this is drawn from that and my own personal experience. So the thin edge of the wedge is basically when you have an idea and you think that there's potential for it to be big, right? That might be big with users or consumers, like like say a social network or something like that. That might be a B2B company of some sort. That might be a nonprofit idea. It could be anything, anything that where you have to start somewhere, but ultimately you think there's the opportunity for a large group of people to benefit from it. But the question is, how do you start? I mean, there's a lot of people building apps on the weekends. There's a lot of big tech companies that have sort of headspace with people already. It's really hard sometimes to break through. So the concepts I think are most useful to think about in 2 dimensions. So I'll start with the first one, which is product sort of principles and strategies of how do you, from purely just building the product itself, what's the best way to build something that can kind of take advantage of starting with something very narrow, and that's the thin edge of the wedge, and then ultimately riding it into something much bigger as that wedge sort of figuratively increases in dimension. So are you guys familiar with do you know what an MVP stands for? Minimal viable product? Okay. If you don't, it's a pretty common sort of lean startup term these days, but basically, the idea is, you can't just go and boil the ocean and do everything all at once. You really need to figure out when you're starting what are the very core critical features and basically the one pain point or problem that you're trying to solve first. And even if you in your head think it's a partial solution to the bigger problem, lean startup and sort of even just borrowing from engineering like agile methodologies, it's a big no-no to try to basically overbuild in the beginning, because you're always going to be wrong about and you're always going to build the wrong things. So the idea is pick your MVP, figure out the first pain point that you want to attack, and that's exactly what this first bullet is. So that this applies to anything, which is there's really, when I think about creating a new product or feature, and I have my own long list of ideas that I keep in an Evernote file, over the years, and I usually try to think of, do they fall into one of these 2 buckets? Is it a pain point that I know, like I personally experience, my daily life, my professional life, where I've noticed, companies that I've worked with or whatever experience, or, and not mutually exclusive, or is it something that I've just seen is for some reason not getting a lot of attention, or just sort of been neglected for a while, and even though there's theoretically a kind of a product or a service that addresses the need, that it just hasn't been innovated on for a while, and there may be good reasons for that. So I'll give you examples of this later. So the second dimension of sort of picking your thin edge is, so a lot of the times, startup ideas, especially the ones, there's a whole sort of set of criteria for what people would consider a high growth, venture backable type of idea, versus a different type of product or company, which might be very profitable and a great product, but has a slightly different trajectory. I'm more so talking about the former in this talk. I think this can apply to anything really, but this really applies more to some kind of product that you think has the ability to really just scale tremendously in a short period of time. And that often ends up being something that you might seek venture capital funding for, but sometimes you can get away with not. That's ideal, but rare. So the second bullet point refers to, okay, if you have these ambitions and aspirations, and you think you're onto something, that could take over the world, but a lot of times those types of companies or those types of products have that explosive potential only because they reach a critical mass where all of a sudden you get you get basically users getting value from each other. So that social networks are a very well sort of used example there, but there's a lot of other examples of that too. But the problem with that is it's sort of a chicken and egg type of thing where you have to start somewhere. You can't just start with a social network where thousands or millions of people are already signed up with profiles, right? So what people oftentimes will use as a gaming analogy of the first thing you need to figure out is what's the single player utility, right? So like you can play Call of Duty with, and hook into the network and play with your friends or a bunch of people, but if you don't have any friends or you just don't have any other people, or even when the game first came out, you could play the computer, right? And so even just on a standalone solid basis, that product, that game had single player utility. But then ideally, especially if you really think there's that opportunity to kind of go up and go up that figurative wedge, you ideally want it to have multiplayer potential as well. And this is actually code for a very common concept with high growth startups, which is, and what all investors and analysts and all that love is the network effects, basically. I don't like to use that term too much because sometimes people confuse network effects and they think very literally of like Facebook or LinkedIn or something. And they think of network effects just means viral growth or something like that, which that's really more a byproduct that's enabled through this. But basically, it is the same concept. I actually like to use the term user interdependence, synonymous for multiplayer potential. So that means, it's basically exactly what I said. Like when you get to a certain scale, your users, your customers can actually start getting value from each other, not just from you. And that is actually really beneficial, not just for growth, but it is, because then you can basically, if you think about networks, you can basically get to an exponential level as users start to sort of spread the word and all that. But also it ends up being much more defensible, your product or your service, especially nowadays when everything's open source and it's so easier to start a company. It's hard to build actual tech that's not easy to copy. It's harder than ever. And so one of the best ways to build what's called a moat around your company is to build in this sort of multiplayer user interdependence dynamic so that your users are not just getting value from you, but they're getting value from each other. Therefore, if someone did a copycat version of what you're doing, they actually can't copy that user interdependence. They can only copy the single player utility. Hopefully that makes sense. So let me switch. On the other dimension of picking what your thin edge is ideally, this is more on a marketing dimension, which is what I'm calling here finding your number one pin. So this is related to a concept of I guess people call it the bowling pin strategy. And this is really more of like a kind of a marketing, like picking your target markets, especially your first target market. So okay, let's say you got a product which you think solves a pain point or is neglected, has great standalone single player utility, but also has the ability in the product to be sort of have your users connect to each other. Where do you start in terms of getting your first user? So the obvious things is, and this is a tautology because the word early adopters implies that they are the first users for whatever you're doing. So that part I'm not going to spend much time on because that's obvious. If you're doing a like a gaming app or something like that, obviously there's probably a niche of gamers that are going to be super psyched about it. And if you're doing a travel one, same thing within, whether it's on the B2B side or the B2C side, that you should just know if you've done your homework on your general market. But these next two, sometimes people don't think through these as much as maybe they should. And so this next one is you want to ideally, your first user group, you want to ideally have kind of what I'm calling natural adjacencies associated with that group. So what that means is, let's say you are building a travel app, and your early adopters could either be foodies from New York, or they are, I don't know, let's say seniors in, New England or something like that. And for whatever reason, that both of them actually are interested in trying the app, but it may be that actually, and actually you could build a case for both. I'm literally making this up in real time. So, but it may be that you think that foodies in New York are also, sort of natural travelers in Europe, or you may think that, senior citizens in New England, they have a lot more spare time, and they actually end up also doing a lot more worldwide travel. Whatever it is, whichever one of the two you think has more than like sort of extensibility or adjacency beyond just that first initial niche, that can be really helpful, because basically the logic is if you get them hooked on whatever you led with. So let's just pick the first group. Foodies in New York, they love this food. Like you take pictures of your food at restaurants and you have some cool social aspect to it. Great, and they love doing that. But you know that they are traveling to other cities around the country, and they are also into other things like museums and culture, and so maybe that then is an easy way for you to extend your product to these other verticals, because you've already picked a user group that is sort of more multidimensional and has these adjacencies. So I'll talk about a very actually relevant example of that in the last decade. The last is actually kind of related to multiplayer potential, which is ideally you also want that group to just be natural shares. That's what sort of inherent virality means. And so, yeah, and maybe that's an argument, by the way, for picking the first demographic, like the foodies who are oversharing, they're constantly Instagramming their plate of food, whereas maybe the people, the folks, the retirees who are into like leaf watching, which by the way, I feel like I'm already there. I love that. Are not as much. They like to just like have the experience themselves, and they're not into sharing as much. Then great, maybe that's actually a reason to focus on the first group. So all these things combined, and it's not always possible to have all of them, but like some of the most successful companies you'll see have done a good job of picking their first MVP and then their first target group, and then checking all those boxes. And so some examples that obviously all of you will be familiar with. So Facebook is the classic one, right? They, Mark Zuckerberg just figured out that like, I don't know if is there still a paper Facebook at Princeton, or that's gone. Okay, so there was when I was in college, and it was like people were glued to it, right? Because that's how you sort of virtually stalk all your classmates, see where they went to high school, like circle people, circle enemies, so whatever. And people were addicted to it, and it's actually amazing that Facebook, the initial incarnation didn't happen sooner, because there was an obvious need to digitize that, right? And he realized that, but I don't even know that he would say that he did this deliberately, but what actually was fortuitous was not only was it a single-player game, it had, very good single-player utilities, literally just taking a directory that used to be on paper, putting it online where everybody was, great. And it was something that was neglected. It actually should have been done probably years before that, and probably by the university, and it hadn't been, okay? And then the third thing is he realized that it's natural then for the people who are, have these profiles to want to connect with each other, to message each other or share a picture or whatever. And his target market was perfect, right? So early adopters, college kids, everyone has a computer, everyone's wired. Not just college kids, Harvard kids, they're in terms of let me skip back here. Natural adjacencies. So they tend to be, from all over the world, all over the country. They have friends in every other college, and especially Ivy Leagues, and then inherent virality, like people, especially at that age, really start to, like to be more social and open. So it was like absolutely hit every one of these dead on, right? And there's lots of examples of this. Opentable was actually the one that I was kind of, I think, subconsciously alluding to before when I was talking about foodies and everything. They actually started with a CRM system for restaurants. So regardless of reserving tables, they gave value to restaurants by keeping track of their customers. And then ultimately, when they got enough restaurants in their first city, users were able to book reservations because there's critical mass. And then those users were into traveling and kind of a very savvy demographic, and into going and eating at restaurants all over the country, and it was just a really easy wedge for them to ride. And then this last example is actually you guys may not be as familiar with the story, but this was the previous startup before Carmera that I was doing, and this the example here was basically it's a commenting system, and this is a classic example of finding something that had been neglected for a long time. Web commenting was old news, like back in the 90s, there was message boards, right? But no one had done anything innovative with them in 10 years. And in 2007, Discuss and a few others popped up, and just like basic low-hanging fruit stuff, like easier ways to sign in and like just a nicer user, sort of user experience and sharing and just better sort of Ajaxy, JavaScript-based experience. That was like enough to get blogs to install us. And then, but what we did very deliberately was we built in interdependency features early on where, if you use that comment system on TechCrunch, and then you went over to CNN, your profile would be universal, and it would sort of follow you along, and so the websites would get benefits from that increased traffic of people kind of frictionlessly being able to comment around the network. So, so those are some examples. Let me see how we're doing on time. I was also going to relate this back to Carmera, but I don't want to waste too much time on this because hopefully getting the picture. Well, let me quickly kind of whiz through these, and then we'll get to maybe going around the room. So Carmera, basically we have a very lofty mission. We're trying to, as we say, create the world's most robust visual index of city streets. Our target markets are things like urban development and transportation, and we want to kind of do this in a very kind of democratized way. I'm going to fly through the tech of it because it's not really the point. But in case you're curious, basically we go and we have a combination of a crowdsourced sensor network where we install sensors on vehicles like this storage van pickup vehicle. We also have much more expensive sensors, 3D sensors on our own vehicle. This is actually my station wagon right now, but we'll be getting our own soon. And then we give our partner fleets that, like for example, that company on top, whose van that is, we give them free telematics software in exchange for collecting the data from the sensors on the road. That's sort of it's sort of a quid pro quo. And then we're able to get actually really great coverage of a big city like New York. This is a 7-day, 30-day, 90 days. We're lighting up almost all the streets that matter in all of New York in terms of getting like street view type imagery, both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional imagery of the roads, and ultimately, actually, what Patrick and Anna have been helping us with this summer is to apply computer vision, machine learning techniques to the data to do things like read text and identify vehicles parked on the road, or identify like sort of subjective signs of safety, greenness, beauty, etc. And then ultimately also build 3D point clouds from the data. And so the this is all well and good, and thankfully we've made really nice progress on this. But the mission here is to be able to do this on a very on a continental level, if not global level, right? Like the idea for Carmera came from actually a little bit from my Civ Orf days, taking Kornhauser's classes and being into transportation back then, and especially like automated transit, and like we wanted to basically help ubiquitize and keep up to date HD maps that driverless cars use. And so, but for that you need to have massive scale. And if you're a huge company like Google or Apple, you can afford to put your own vehicles out there and spend $1 billion a year on it, which they do, which is crazy. But for us, we had to figure out how do we start with something fairly narrow, and especially as constrained as we are as a seed stage startup, and then what's the path then, what's the wedge then to get to that big lofty goal? So what we figured out, and actually to be perfectly frank with you, we didn't really fully even appreciate this when we were raising our seed round and started building. Like we kind of came to learn this. We had a hunch on this, but we really came to get more conviction on this later, which was that we could start by really focusing on a use case that is that we can cater to just in one city, so just locally, and that is surveying for infrastructure projects. So, for example, they are, like after Hurricane Sandy, there's a lot of resilience work along the FDRs to prevent flooding if that happens again. So, for all that work, usually these engineering firms or the city agencies, they either to kind of model new flood walls or whatever, they either have to pick between 2-year-old 2-dimensional Google Street View data, or they have to go and shut down streets or commission a surveying firm for tens of thousands of dollars, take 6 weeks to get the data back to give them sort of good 3D data on what the road looks like. And so we realized that hey, we could create a cloud platform to let people access it instantly, probably for an order of magnitude cheaper and order of magnitude quicker. And most crucially is we don't have to wait till we are in the top 20 cities or whatever in the country to be able to serve this market. We can do it just in New York because an engineering firm doesn't care that we have Boston data too. All they care about is this project they're trying to bid on. So that for us is our edge where we believe we can essentially subsidize our loftier, larger goal by basically focusing on this sort of narrower use case just in our beginning city. Now, one thing I will say is that I actually think that example is probably not a good example of the right-hand side of the page that I showed you before, which is picking a target market that is inherently has like a lot of adjacencies and virality, because like a lot of the use cases are actually pretty New York centric. So the other thing that we're doing is that we are also, especially on the 2D side of things, we are doing a lot of basically computer vision analysis to show real estate developers interesting things like, like with Anna's work, for example, she is helping us index what brand of car tends to be parked on our street. And it's actually really interesting for real estate prospectors to know that, all of a sudden, family station wagons or German luxury cars are showing up in this corner of Brooklyn that they would have never thought, right? And so that group of people are actually very kind of, both sort of nationally present and very kind of open and public. And there's a whole kind of real estate community, which is not just in New York. It's sort of, it's a fairly kind of national group of people. So that's actually our answer to try to, pick that wedge in terms of a target market, and then hope that the word spreads through that first target segment. So hopefully, I know I whizzed through that. Hopefully that gives you an idea what I'm talking about. And let's see, we are at, yeah, good, so 7:20. So what I was hoping was that, we could kind of take this and just kind of get volunteers and like in real time, and I hope, all of you guys sort of help each other. Like, let's see if we can kind of help someone find the wedge for their idea, or maybe even more than one person if we have time. Does anyone want to volunteer and sort of share their idea, and maybe if they've already thought about this, you can feel free to talk about that. But if not, that's fine. We can kind of maybe help you along these dimensions. Anyone want to be the first? I'm seeing nodding head. Yeah, all right. I already know your name. You're Aaron, right? Yeah. Yeah, I'm told you have a. Are you working on something? Yeah. All right. Well, do you guys already know what Aaron's working on?
I think most people here.
All right. Well, I'm gonna actually step down here. Yeah. Well, give me the 60-second.
So the company that we're working on is called Box Power.
Okay.
And our origins began as a Princeton engineering design course called Power in a Box. And essentially, it's a self-contained renewable energy system that comes self-contained in a shipping container. And so there's solar panels, a wind turbine, battery bank, and backup generator that all come pre-packaged, and you can deploy the system in under a day. And so our target market right now is working to deploy this for off-grid electrification.
Okay.
And we're working on a partnership with the Navajo Nation, where there are 18,000 off-grid families. And our eventual goals would be able to get this hardware to a point where we're getting interest from FEMA, from USAID, for applications ranging from off-grid electrification, like what we're starting with, all the way to disaster relief and creating microgrids across the world.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, let's so like, okay, do you want to go down the left-hand side first? Like, what was the initial problem that, the sort of the pithy problem statement for Box Power?
Yeah, so the main problem is that a lot of off-grid families, and right now that's a $40 billion market, are relying on diesel generators.
Okay.
And those are noisy, they're bad for the environment, they are often one of the greatest expenses that families incur, and they're spending a lot of money on it. So that was kind of one of the inspirations that we thought, well, if we can bring a more affordable system that's clean,
Okay,
that
great.
you create financing for, then consumers might be interested.
Great, done. And that also, I think the second sort of creating the single player utility, I think that's sort of self-evident. So that's great. Now, have you ever thought about how your customers, I don't know how you define a customer, whether it's like a government agency or utility or something, but or a family, but whatever that is, can you think of a way that there's sort of this multiplayer game, and so like more concretely, how could they get value from each other?
So one of the things that we were thinking is, so right now the system is a community scale system, so you can easily go on Google and order like a residential solar system right now.
Okay, yeah.
It'll provide family for one house.
Yep.
As is now, it's able to provide energy to a number of off-grid homes, so like a small community. And what we would hope to, once we have enough scale, would be to actually take these communities and then wire them together and create a self-contained microgrid. And that way they can buy and sell electricity from each other.
Great, perfect. I was good. Yeah, I was just going to say, like, sometimes people confuse the fact that you can serve multiple, like it's sometimes confusing, this idea of network effects, or what we're calling here multiplayer mode, because some people conflate it with just the ability to like have one service that serves a lot of people. The whole, actually, if there were a whiteboard here, I like to sketch on whiteboards these things. But if you think about any network, or if you think about like a node, right? And that could be anything, but let's just say that's box power, right? So you have a node, and then, or you have a hub, and then you have nodes, which are your users, right? So, solving for the single player utility is like basically you're presenting arcs, edges from the hub to the nodes, right? So that's pretty straightforward. Any company or service has to do that. And so I think what you were talking about with sort of the sharing, being part of the same grid and sharing energy and all that is where one node instead is just in effect kind of bypasses the hub, which is you guys, and basically you're directly connecting to another box power user essentially to be able to coordinate, I guess, network traffic or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. So that's great. That's actually a classic example. And what's great about that is once you are able to do that, like if someone tries to come in, it'll be a lot harder to displace you. Not that it's not possible, but it'd be a lot harder if I, as a customer, know that, oh well, Schmock's actually has better prices, and they have a catchy commercial, but I can't, my neighbor or my uncle down the street, I can't get the same sort of admin tools and share information about how we're, or like pool our account or something like that, because none of my no one I know is on that network already. So good, classic example, great. So okay, now this one might be a little trickier, but what about the right-hand side? So target market. So there's a lot of ways you could go with this, right? So what do these off-grid, customers look like? Like where are they? Who are they?
So one of the things that we're really excited about, and actually taking a call about half an hour with one of the head honchos in the Navajo Nation governance, is that the way that land rights are distributed there is that there are already a number of communities of between 5 to 12 families that are dispersed throughout the reservation. And so these are, we hope to be our early adopters and to launch a pilot program there with one or hopefully a couple of these communities. And so once we kind of demonstrate minimum viable product, show that the system works, make any of the tweaks that we need based on their feedback, then we can go and say, hey, we have this system, we've worked out the tweaks, and then we'll be a lot more confident when we go to USAID or other government agencies. We're always looking for this type of technology. So I guess like the adjacency there is that there's tons of money being provided through the federal government for tribal energy systems.
Okay, okay.
Like a tribal energy department.
Right.
And I think we would hope to kind of like, once we show that this is a worthy technology, maybe get their attention and they can help us find other partnerships. Okay.
No, that's great. Actually, when you were first talking, I was wondering what like the actual, sort of tribes or tribal agencies themselves, or sorry, tribal agencies of the government agencies? Or,
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, at first I was wondering how naturally viral or agents the tribes are themselves. But I think I know where you're getting at, which is the agencies that administer them actually have a bigger purview. Is that basically what you're saying?
Exactly. So there's actually like a tribal utility authority.
That's great.
Who would be like we would be selling to them rather than to like the individual like end users who would be like getting one of these systems.
Okay. Have you thought about any other types of stakeholder that tends to not just have a lot like adjacencies, but also tends to be like almost like evangelists, like mini type evangelists. That's kind of what virality also speaks to a little bit, right? So like ideally, like the foodies who are on Opentable, they won't shut up, right? and they'll talk about their favorite restaurant or their favorite whatever all day long to people. They're just like that. Does that exist in your world? Are there like, for example, one, this might be a bad idea, but like I have a little bit of NGO experience, and I do know there's a pretty vibrant community within like like a lot of like management consultants will go off and work for an NGO before business school or something like that, and so I get invited to those events all the time and pretty active on social media and all that. Expats, who do that kind of stuff. Anything like that come to mind?
So I guess the most immediate thing that comes to mind is like there's actually a group of people who are just like obsessed with shipping containers.
Okay.
Actually, like the shipping container home movement.
Yeah, I know about that. Yeah.
And there's a real thing. Like, there's like magazines that like they publish just about like making your like shipping container home. And that would be a really interesting market if we can say, all right, not only can you live in the shipping container, but you can get electricity from it too.
Yeah.
So like that's one idea.
Yeah.
And they love like sharing those ideas.
That's great. No, that's perfect. That was a good one. Anyone want to go next? And this time I actually want to do minimal talking. I want you guys to actually workshop it. One of you guys raise your hand. You, I think? Or no? Someone on this side of the table said they were working on an idea. Yeah? Oh, yeah.
I have an idea that I built at a hackathon.
Okay, that's great. Let's hear it.
So it was a web app, which would ultimately just be an app that helps you keep in touch with close friends and family. And the whole point of it was calendar sync-ups, and then frequency, how often you want to talk to someone.
Okay.
Find free places in your calendar and schedule calls, texts, messages, or things you want to send to your really close friends and family. And eventually have a message board, all the things happening to the people you care about, and ability to send cards, flowers and all that directly in one hug.
Okay, great. So it sounds like you have the big ass wedge in mind, because there's a lot of stuff in there, which is great. So let's start with what is the killer first thing the first feature that you'd build? Either the biggest pain, the biggest neglect, or both that is, yeah.
So when I built it, it was because I felt like I wasn't calling my grandma enough.
Okay.
And I felt because I just didn't have a scheduled time to do it, and I feel like if I had, I would do it with her.
Yeah.
So I was I want just someone to schedule time for when I can call my grandma.
Yeah.
At a time that won't bother me. or her. She's busy as well.
I actually really like that idea, and you've been validated, by the way, because I think Google recently just added a kind of a reminder. It's different from calendar appointments, but it's a reminder. And actually, they have some stock reminders. It's one of them is work out, one of them is meditate. And I tried the meditate one, but I just sleep through it every morning. But I actually, this is really embarrassing. I don't know if I am admitting it, but I put one into. My wife is pregnant, and I put one in every 2 weeks to just compliment her, because I think I'm really trying to be better about that proactively. So no, but seriously, I think especially the world's getting busier and people do do need that. So that's cool. But okay, since we're on the topic, anyone else can anyone else think of a potential wedge? Let's say that is a good idea, but But it's Google, as I said, actually, I think has started to offer something in their calendar tools. Anyone think of another edge that? Sorry, what's your name again?
Anid.
And what is it?
Anid.
A-N-I-D?
Yeah.
Okay, that Anid could build first.
I like the flower portal idea, where you just go in and order different gifts for people, which I think Facebook might have, but it's not the kind of thing that no one uses. But just like an easy way to like do thoughtful things for people that are kind of a little bit inconvenient in your real life. So I like that being it's a little more complicated maybe than just a calendar thing, but I think that's like a really useful edge.
I think just calling people, like, that's such a legitimate thing. Like, I would love to talk to my grandma more, but like, it doesn't always come to my mind. It's like, oh, this would be a great time for me to like call grandma. So I think like just having like a reminder thing where you can like put in a list of contacts and then like a frequency where like you'd be reminded of, and it could be like a little bit randomized. So it's not like every like Thursday at 2 o'clock, but like it would randomize a little bit so that it would. You're a little bit surprised, then I think that would be cool.
No, I like that. Actually, one thing that comes to mind is, yeah, maybe anybody could, in a calendar software, put in a reminder feature, but something like that, like, no one's working on, like, when is the best time to call grandma versus your cousin versus, your friend, and maybe, it could learn from, either things you preset it or from, sucking in your Facebook data or whatever, and sort of try to optimize that over time. Maybe there's a machine learning component to it where it gets better over time. Okay, well, cool. So let's just stick with that. I like that as an edge. That's also personally interesting to me. So then there's a clear. I think we all think that no one's really focused much on that, and calling is a lost art. So that's great. It's something that's neglected. I think there's a clear single player utility there. Like, it doesn't matter if anybody else is using a nidster or whatever you're going to call it. It just has an intrinsic value in that it reminds you to do something that you want to do. Now, anything come to mind where there could be kind of this multiplayer mode to it?
So I was thinking like family events, like eventually like weddings and like birth, like I don't know, like big cousins or cousins are being born and stuff like that. A way for families to like kind of keep in touch in a more intimate setting rather than just like over Facebook and stuff. So that's what I was thinking down the line. But that's about all the thought I came.
Hey, cool. Anyone else?
Well, is that like an event invitation you're talking about?
I don't know. I really didn't think about it. I just built it in 2 hours.
That's perfect. No, this is good. Yeah.
Like what I had envisioned at the end was like a dashboard of kind of like all your family events coming up, and then like abilities to like participate, like just with your family, like preset gifts and stuff like that. Maybe send cards. That's kind of like just a way of participating within those specifically. That's just one idea. That's
okay.
all I thought of.
So it sounds like right now you're thinking the network effect, the multiplayer mode is it's pretty obvious. It's within a family because they're obviously the ones calling each other or sending cards to each other. Anyone think of something that's might be even broader or a different way to have people getting utility from each other, not just from the service? Yeah.
So you can sync up calendars with each other, and like maybe like when two people are available at one time, they both get a notification. Be like, this is a good time to call each other right now.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah.
You can use like a service like Google, their API. Just like that's like something pretty easy to implement.
Yep.
Maybe you could integrate it with like some wedding registries or something.
Okay. So then you're branching out outside of families. Sorry. What was the last thing you said? What was the last thing you said?
You could build a condos networks, and then like you have friends who use that, and then the friends who use it for their own events.
Cool.
I was gonna say maybe like sport teams to like try to like know when like certain things are happening with like position meetings or broader meetings with like your like coach and whole team. Just like sometimes I find that it's like kind of hard to like meet my position group just so you can like sync up calendars in that way.
Did you ever think about applying an IDSTR to? Sorry, I'm just going to call it that. Oh, really? Do you own love.ly?
No.
Oh, I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Well, lovely. Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. Like, so Logan, you play sport?
Yeah, football.
Football. So, you ever thought about that? You ever?
I thought it was just going to be just exclusively for like intimate connection.
Well, so now let's. This gets interesting, right? This gets interesting because now we have, like your first thought was, families, like, you probably think about your own family. But now Logan's introduced another potential segment. It's like before I was talking about, are we going to do foodies? Are we going to do retirees? let's move on maybe to the the targets market segment. So early adopters between let's just use those two for now. What's your thought on who's more likely to be your early users and be willing to give you feedback and don't care about bugs and stuff like that?
So I was thinking like people who are like very, very busy,
Mm-hmm.
And especially like use their calendars a lot. That was like my main thing. And then also like another thing I was thinking of is like parents trying to make kids keep in touch with relatives.
Mm-hmm.
So them implementing like reminders to keep in touch with relatives. But mainly I was thinking more in terms of myself and like often forgetting or like not even thinking about it. So people with like busy calendars who like want to stay in touch but don't often like remember to. So college students I think is pretty
Okay,
like
that makes sense.
target market for that.
And then adjacencies, like are you first of all, do you want this to be? Do you think this has the potential to be something much broader and bigger, or? Well, I guess you're just it's a hack, but yeah. Let's say you do want it to be something bigger. Yeah, like of some of these groups. So whether it's college kids with families, or maybe it's athletes who go to college and have families. Like what? Any thoughts about leveraging the fact that they have different spheres that they're kind of active in?
Yeah. So another idea that I had for kind of like growth and stuff was if you have the ability to kind of like give gifts for special events and kind of do nice things for people much easier, then maybe it could be like a client management platform for sales reps who like to keep in touch with clients on a more intimate level rather than just
oh, interesting. Very cool. So, okay.
Especially when like people who deal with one-on-one
Yeah.
clients, and like my mom's in sales, so I know she likes buying flowers whenever clients have birthdays, or getting them like stuff for their kids when they're born, and so a platform for that, I think would be pretty cool.
That is super interesting. So you might even want to talk to this guy. So there's this fun bar downtown called the Whiskey Tavern. This guy there, it's a co-owner, name's Rob. And my group of friends, when I actually used to be able to go to bars, we used to go there and have a great time, and he always remembered our name. He used to like even know about birthdays and like come and build like these goofy little like dioramas for us and stuff. And it was just, and like at a bar, one of the coolest things about a bar is when they actually know you, and they call you by your name, or maybe they even comp you a drink, but it's more really just the familiarity. And we realized later that actually, and I mean, it's not that he's not genuine, but we realized he actually had a system. Like they had like their own CRM system, but it was very crude. They would like just write in a book, oh, Ro comes in here all the time, this is his birthday, this is his favorite sports team, but very analog, right? I really, so basically, are you saying that people have families, but also in their professional lives, if they're in sales or some kind of relationship business, that they could kind of get value out of the app in the same way?
Yeah, it's like, just an easy way to manage like the relationship.
Love it. Great. And then the last thing is, who's going to go tell the world about it?
People who use it. I feel like someone like the like super social people, like those people who, like you said, like always know your birthday, very into keeping in touch with people, giving them a platform to make that easier for them is something they could get really excited about and share.
Yeah, but who are they? How do you get to them? Like, how do you know who they are? Anyone have any ideas?
Well, I was going to say, like, the bar that you were talking about, if a NID was able to, like, integrate that into there, then, like, I think that in, like, a place like New York City, like, it sprints pretty fast and bars, like, having more success. And, like, people are going there because that bar is more intimate, so, like, I feel like the sheer word of mouth of that, or, like, if we're talking about, like, a football team, like, I know, like, a lot of college teams use, like, once, like, they'll, like, try something new, and then that'll, like, spread like wildfire, and a bunch of college teams will, like, jump on the bandwagon with that once they hear that it's good, so, like,
cool.
When you do start integrating to like larger groups, I feel like with the word of mouth, you'll definitely have people like jumping on if it's working.
But I wonder, particularly with your example, with the bartender, was he like giving the information out that he used kind of like that analog CRM information?
Well, yeah, partly we knew that because one of our friends ended up bartending at one of his bars, and we kind of got, we kind of got wind of it. And I actually don't think I think other restaurants have kind of caught wind of this, and they kind of try to do something similar. But I don't know where you're getting it to with your question.
I wonder if it makes it look less sincere.
Yeah, no, well, that's why I was immediately, if you noticed, I said he's still very genuine about it, But you're right. There's a very cynical view you could take of, it's like a sales rep basically. So good point. There's also sort of risk.
That could be particularly dangerous with your grandmother.
It shows that you care more.
Yeah, I guess if my wife realizes I'm giving her a compliment on Wednesdays at 5 every other week, it might lose its impact. Good point. You have to there you go. It's a randomization. Yeah. So, any other ideas on natural shares, or actually, I think that was a nice little real-time, workshopping of that. Cool. I think that's interesting. Let's see, what time is it? Do we have time for one more? Does anyone else have something they want to throw out to the group? I actually have time. I have about 10 minutes left. So anyone else have any ideas that they're thinking about? Or we can also kind of break and just chat informally. Good? Oh, yeah, Anna.
Okay, so this is just like something I was thinking about yesterday. I think it would be really cool to apply machine learning techniques to cybersecurity.
Okay.
So I don't know a lot about cybersecurity, but I think that the way most detection works is that they look for specific signatures, and malware is like constantly evolving. There's always like new malware coming out, but they usually use like similar techniques. So if you could train an algorithm to sort of look for these techniques instead of looking for specific signatures, the algorithm would get smarter and smarter, and you might be able to like detect malware before like it even becomes known.
So I know for a fact that's a good idea because there's a couple companies who've recently gotten funded. One of them is actually a Resi Ventures company, which was one of our VCs. But let's go through the list real quick. So, okay, single player game. What is it? Great, easy. So you're sensing patterns. You're telling the company this might be fraud, or sorry, this might be an attack or something. Attacker. Multiplayer game.
If they're all using the same machine learning algorithm, it would supposedly become smarter and smarter the more people use it, so they would all benefit.
Yep. What else? So like the algorithm itself is getting more data, so that it's benefiting from more data from everybody. But how else could it be beneficial? Like sort of where your users are connected to each other. Can you think of anything else? So like one hint is like anti-spam technology, for example. Like when there's sort of known bad actors, right? So kind of like I'll just sort of fill in the blank, but like having we actually also did this at Discuss, my previous startup, where there are spammers or trolls or whatever, and we would have a global reputation system. So like if a troll was trolly on CNN, chances are they might be trolly on on TMZ, and we could identify to TMZ moderator that this person has a low reputation score or something like that, right? So that's a classic example. Yeah. Cool. So who would you target first?
Maybe small to mid-sized companies that don't have like really good systems in place, or like the ones with like all the really good systems, and they just use like Microsoft Security Essentials or something.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. They'd be early adopters. They'd be like willing to test stuff and be scrappy about it. But then, how could you parlay that into more than just small SaaS businesses and kind of take over the world? Like meaning like in terms of adjacencies and natural virality, like what specific types of companies, whether that's a vertical or a geography or whatever, do you think would be the best? Like the number, as I said, think of the bowling pins. What's your number one pin you want to knock over first? Like getting specific.
Tech companies that are dealing with a lot of sensitive data, because they have a breach, they're just like over.
But are they forthcoming in terms of sharing? I don't know, by the way, and maybe you don't know either, but are they the type, is there like a biotech community where they're all sort of comparing notes on the best technologies? No, I mean, that's a lot. There are, in some verticals it is like that. In others it's like, we don't want anybody to know about anything. But maybe you don't know the answer either, but that's something to think about, right? So like, anyway, that's good. Well, we're almost out of time. I actually have to run to another thing in a few minutes, but I'll be hanging on a little bit. But thanks for indulging me. Hopefully that sort of worked. It's the first time I've tried that, but and thanks for coming. This was fun.